Hi guys, welcome back to my channel and a happy new year to you all. I do hope you have a blessed new year and that you can carry on and bring abundance and happiness into your home and your life. Third part of Marie Laveau, we are looking into hairdressing skills. So, Marie had a lot of information regarding high class people and the luxury homes that had tainted blood, well noted family names that had secrets. But she didn't bribe, she didn't tell anyone. She was very confidential, she kept it all very confidential. June the 21st, 1821, and this is according to the legend, Marie Laveau became an hairdresser after the presumed death of her husband, Jacques Paris. And as I've said, there is no records, but what's important is that it was very common to become an hairdresser. It was the occupation at the time that many would choose, so it does not seem far-fetched that she possibly went into this trade. The Louisiana's Writers Project had some people in it that did interviews stating they remembered her as an hairdresser. Teresa Kavanagh, born around 1860, said Marie Laveau called herself an hairdresser, and that is how she got in the good graces of the high-class families. Marie Washington, born in 1863, remembered Marie as some kind of hairdresser and seamstress, sewing basically, but that was more in the early days. Apparently, she was very equipped in fooling people, and becoming an hairdresser gave her privilege to rub shoulders in the most finest of families. She was, after all, invited into their homes, and she was said to possibly even pay off for any black servants that they had, any coloured servants they had. Not in a way that would release them from their bindings, but to become her mole in the household. Think about that. This gave her all the access to the inside information and the knowledge, which would lead to Marie going to their house, being their hairdresser, and sort of coaxing the women to confessing their problems to Marie. And it gave her an edge with the conjuring and the voodoo work. If you think about it, it's kind of like Marie paid the servants to give her information so that when she went to do her hairdressing, she already had some kind of knowledge of what was going on in the house. And the more knowledge she got, the better she would become at getting them to confess. The more confessions that she got, the better her conjuring work would become. Kind of makes sense, doesn't it, when you think about it that way, rather than her knowing things without being told information that we can actually understand, and we can sit and say, yeah, I can really see that happening. In fact, I'm pretty sure, some places it's still done like that. So it does make sense. Of course, to her clients, she would absolutely get them to spill the darkest secrets, and it would somewhat, to them, they would see Maria as being somewhat gifted and able to understand just what they were going through, to bring it forward out of them, then keep it confidential. She knew who was cheating with who, whose babies were actually whose, but she kept all the secrets. And they, of course, in return, knew she had the keys to every scandal, every high-class secret in that circle, that society. Marie knew. She absolutely knew. Whether or not this is true, knowledge does indeed give perception of power for sure, it always has. Her premonitions did all near enough come true. The paths she advised to others were generally always the wisest, and this is how she built a huge clientele of upper class and the prestige. Myths around hairdressing and voodoo, such as never throwing a comb away with your hair left in it, that is so true, never do that. Hair should be burnt. Never leave your hair lying around, not even one. Just don't. It's got your DNA on it, especially if it's come from the bulb, from the follicle. That's definite DNA. Apparently, if a bird were to collect the hair and weave it into their nest, the person would have an headache for as long as it was being woven in the nest. So it was custom to burn a client's hair that was cut back then. A voodooist could read how the hair burned and tell the clients what was to come. When the hair burns light and bright, it means a long, happy life is to be had. And when the hair sort of fails to catch fire or burns slow and dull, it represents illness or death being the inevitable. That makes sense too. I mean, even in just a divination perspective, it is what you would actually say comes from divination. You know, when something's bright and vibrant, yeah, means more or whatever, and when something's dull, it means less. It's kind of common sense that now. It wasn't back then. Some people, of course, they referred to her as a con woman rather than a cunning woman. It's important to understand that's a matter of perception. It's everybody's different and people criticise regardless, don't they? So, you know. However it was, she collected info and networked like any strong independent businesswoman would. She was very clever at showing up in places. She would be remembered for those particular places because of the places that she chose. So she knew what she was doing. Her business side grew through word of mouth. So sink rooms, courthouses, marketplaces were regular places she would grace. Her customers were satisfied, leading to great results. So, if the truth about how she managed her business affairs were put in the local papers and the tabloids, rather than portraying her as a voodoo priestess and questioning her ability and portraying her as some sort of evil blah blah blah, would it have ever come into question? The tabloids, yet again, blowing things out of proportion. If it was her business skills that were reported in the newspaper, rather than it all being put down to evil craft, it would make a massive difference, wouldn't it? You know, the tabloids wouldn't be the same, would they? They'd have a completely different article, and that's just fact. So we do tend to assume she grew up in the cottage in which her grandmother had, and it's, you know, there's not really much about it, but it is a presumption. So the New Orleans Republican 1873 did write an article regarding Marie Laveau's cottage. The childhood home was 152 St. Anne Street, and that remained a primary residence until her death in 1881. The cottage housed most of the Laveau family for nearly 100 years. It was from 1798 to 1897. Her grandmother, Marguerite Henry, purchased the lot in 1798, and it was set back off the street. It was kind of a square and it was a one-story structure, but it had 4 outbuildings. One of the outbuildings itself was sort of 1.5 stories high. This meaning there was plenty of space for someone to take residence or stay in that area if they actually needed to. The Louisiana's Writers Project interviews that were conducted, they stated that Marie allowed many Choctaw women to camp out in her backyard, provided shelter for slaves who needed a safe place. Marie's grandmother had that house built as a result of her own blood, sweat, and tears. Hard work, really hard work. She paid for it all to be built from her hard work. Upon her death, the house went into probate, and a resident in good standing came forward claiming the estate had owed him due to a lingering debt. Upon her death and them discovering that this debt was still there, Marie and a few other family members made the decision to put the house up for auction. It was then purchased by Christian Glapion, who allowed Marie's family to continue living there. The original structure is long gone, unfortunately. It's not there anymore. It's no longer standing. There is something else, we'll get into that in a minute, but St Anne Street is just important because it helps us understand how she grew up. Descriptions of her home have said to give up clues of her conjuring and her practice, and the site itself has many legends and tales. Legends and tales and myths are far more exciting than the actual reality, though, aren't they? Let's be fair. George William Knott, 1869 to 1946, promoted a magical version of how the house came to be lived in by the Voodoo Queen. So, the story goes, a man was in some real legal trouble, and he was from a good standing family. The evidence against him was very strong. So his father went to Marie Laveau for help, obviously, promising Marie a good reward if she would get his son out of trouble completely. And as the story goes as legend, and it's not real, this is legend, myth, it is just a story. On the day of the court date of the young man, Marie entered the St. Louis Cathedral at dawn. She knelt at the altar rail for several hours with 3 guinea peppers in her mouth. Then she crept in the Cabal den next door, and it was like under, and she deposited these peppers under the judge's chair. Remember, the room next to the church was generally where judgment took place because the church were very involved as well back then. So she basically spat the peppers under the judge's chair. The young man was, of course, dismissed. And as promised, the father paid Marie by handing her the cottage on St. Anne's Street. And it's almost adjacent to the Conga Square. She lived there until her death. That is just a story. It is believed, of course, that it was Christoph that let them stay there. But that's just how legends go. They are created and they are fascinating. Who knows, maybe it was true. We can't really say, but according to records, Christoph bought it and let them live there. 1873, and this was 8 years before her death, the New Orleans Republican printed a description of the inside of the house, and it does kind of match the people that spoke about it for word of mouth. It matches their descriptions. The fact that workers had a private area for conjuring away from prying eyes, this is actually very true. We have, so in what I do as well, we have altars everywhere. We have many altars, but our actual working altar is not allowed to be shared. We cannot share it. So my altar changes all the time because I have a working altar, but I have general altars. The general altars are used for everyday things. My working altar, as it's very particular to what it needs, and it does not, I don't show it because that would then contaminate it, if you understand. So a real area, working area, altar, spell area, conjuring area, you would never share. You just wouldn't. And there's many whispers, obviously, of hidden rooms behind curtains of beads, and the fact that she had hidden rooms all over laundromats in New Orleans. There's loads of whispers like that. And it wasn't uncommon for workers to have a Catholic appearing altar in the front of the house where everybody could see, but out of the way in the back, there would be a working conjuring altar. And working altars are not pretty. They would contain animal parts, jars of unknown potions. There'd be urine probably, there'd be sweat, there'd be hair, just very odd things. Just, you can imagine. They would have, but it was needed. It was just how it is. It's standard practice to keep spell work out of sight, so no energies can interfere. The imaginations of people that don't really know much about conjuring, though, can absolutely run away with them. Hence the description. It was surprising that it had been put in quite to word of mouth, because you expect them to exaggerate on it, don't you? It was scantily furnished, a few chairs. It had an old table, and it did have a door that was covered by a beaded curtain that was attached to that room when it was closed. And it is believed that nobody was allowed in that room. Nobody at all, except for Maria herself, of course. It had a picture of water as well. For some reason that was important. But then they go in to say how it was embedded with supernatural powers and entities. And don't forget, the evil spirits, they're always about. You know what I mean, right? So 1020 St. Anne Street actually now only mocks the original site, because the actual numbers, it's not right now, it's not there. So it's just a mock of the original home. The original Laveau cottage was torn down in 1903. A new structure was built over the same foundations. And the Paranormal Society researchers believe that the energy of Maria and her family and those who resided, the residual of conjurings, still reside at that location, and that's why it's featured on haunted tours in New Orleans. And there are also stories told of Marie Laveau's ghost walking down St. Anne's Street, wearing a long white dress and a white tignon tied in several points to signify a crown. I'm not saying people may not see her like that, because I do think if we see things, a lot of it can be to do with our mind, and I think we can put our own perception on what we're seeing, even if it's not what someone else sees, and we're still like, that's what I saw. Because I think things can appear to us very differently than they can to another person, because a lot of it has to do with our mind. But we do know, remember, from the beginning, she wouldn't have worn a tin young as such. Not many people said she ever did. So I don't know. It's interesting, but I guess people who perceive her that way may see her that way as a spirit. Our mind's a fascinating thing. It can do a lot of things and make us see things and stuff, especially when we're feeling different emotions. I'm not saying that it's not a ghost either. That's not what I'm saying. It could absolutely be a spirit. I'm just saying, remember that we do know from what's been told of Marie Laveau, she didn't actually wear that. And her hair was to her shoulders and curly, so I don't know. Make of it what you will. I'm going to leave this part here because we've already got onto the 19-minute mark. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. Please leave a like and don't forget to subscribe. Many blessings.